But I don't think school can make you much if your parents are breaking. But it's impossible to grow up not knowing how to think without almost everyone in your life being complicit in that process. For their own reasons, whether they're selfish or defensive doesn't really matter. But once you realize that you have had your birthright, I mean, is this not the essence of what it is to be a human being, is to reason? Is this not the essence of what it is to be human, to know how to reason? Is there anything else which differentiates fundamentally from all other carbon-based life forms than our ability to conceptualize, to reason, to philosophize? Philosophy, for want of a better phrase, is the soul of the species. Philosophy is the soul of the species. It's what differentiates us from all other animals, as the soul differentiates us from all other animals in theological terms. And when your natural capacity to reason is blocked, is overturned, is crushed, is turned into a fine powder of insomniac regret, your soul has been taken from you. This is why, of course, stories of the undead who thirst for brains but never get their fill are so common in the world, because this situation is so common in the world. It's so tragic. And so necessary for the horrors of the system that we live in. So once you realize that your ability to reason is gone, has been stripped away from you, the way it always seemed to me was that my brain was removed from my skull, pushed up against a cheese grater, and ground until there were huge gaping craters in it where my essence, my humanity, my soul should have been. And you can reclaim it and you can rebuild it. And you are stronger. You are the $6 billion man. You are stronger afterwards. But it is a gruesome and grueling process. Right? The undead don't look dead if you walk with them. But when you walk against them, well, you see them for what they are, and they see you for what you are. If you're like Samwise and Frodo walking with the orcs, do not let them see too deep under your helmet. Just pretend you're a very short goblin, cross your fingers and hope you cross through. So here, we resurrect. Here, we recover. Here, we regrow. And here, we do save.
Alright, Steve, you're up next.
Alright, let us continue with the Sunday show, Sausage Fest. Steve, go for it.
Hello. I'd like to talk about sensible solutions to ending the Federal Reserve. I think going out and protesting and asking for legislation is a waste of time. It's degrading to anyone who would partake. You're basically asking to be ruled all over again. Instead, I think educating people about alternatives to Federal Reserve notes and any central bank issued currency is probably the more feasible way to create actual change in the world. Most people don't know the value of precious metals, and they don't know about Bitcoin, Litecoin, and other virtual currency exchanges. They don't know about alternate currency cards, which actually contain precious metals in them. They don't know about local currencies, like Bitcoin hours, Birch shares, Mountain hours, Mr. Bond. I was just wondering what you would think would be an effective way to educate people about these sort of things through social media and organizing events. I recently organized an event to rally at the Federal Reserve to have a sort of volunteerist-oriented protest. I can see a state-oriented protest as people with signs saying, make a law, repeal a law, or spend everyone's money. But a volunteerist-oriented protest would be more like, this is the problem, here's the solution, invest in the solution. Do you think it's important for voluntarists to have rallies and do it in their own unique, unstatist way so that we can help defeat the state by outmoding it and making it obsolete with better alternatives?
Well, I'm fine with alternative currencies. I'm holding on to bitcoins even though they're dipping, just because I try to make my investment decisions based on the best philosophical principles that I can think of, and I think that Bitcoin and Litecoin and other things are great, just because they are relatively free market solutions to the complex problems of currency and so on. So I'm holding on to them. I think that in the long run they're going to be of great value, and so I think these things are wonderful. I don't think things like Bitcoin and so on are going to take down the state. I don't think that's going to occur. I think for people who want to barter and so on, it's a good medium and a good way of being able to do that. And I think that, again, I do think that they will increase in value, and I'm certainly holding on to them. But and I don't plan on selling at any time. But I do at any time in the sort of near to medium future. But I don't think that alternate currencies are going to do it. Corporations are so embedded in the state, and they're so dependent upon the state. They use the state for so much of their pseudo-competitive advantage over the young, the nimble, the poor, the hardworking, and so on. You know, there's the great challenge of becoming rich is that you become less competitive, right? This is supposed to be the natural cycle of the free market, the rags to riches to rags in 3 generations, right? So what happens is, you come up with some great idea, you make a couple $1 million, or maybe a couple $1 billion or whatever, right? And then you buy these big-ass houses, and your expenses go way up, and the work ethic of your children goes down, and so on, right? I mean, and then you can't compete with the next brilliant guy who's got a great idea and who makes money and takes away your market share and does all these kinds of things. There's supposed to be this natural cycle. And in the absence of the state, the fluidity of the classes would be far greater. I mean, it'd be like a washing machine, moved round and round, up and down, round and round, up and down. But what happens, of course, is that people who become wealthy immediately glom onto the state and start using the state to keep the poor from competing with them. They really have to keep the poor from competing with them. The poor have lower expenses, so they can be paid a lot less, which renders them to be more competitive. They have greater ambition. Why? Because they're poor, right? I mean, so they have a really great ambition to not be poor, so they're incredibly hardworking, and they have very low expenses, and they have time, and they don't have to meet with their accountants very often. And so the best thing for the poor is a free market, because you have an automatic advantage in the free market just by being poor. So you have disadvantages too, right? Less access to capital and so on, but those can actually be advantages as well. So, because you don't have to dilute your ownership in whatever enterprise you're building and so on. So, the poor have a huge advantage if they want it in the free market, and the rich have a huge disadvantage in that they work less and they need more money for what they work. So from that standpoint, the state is just terrible for hardening class divisions. And this is not, it's not a theory. You can see this very much borne out in fact, in that as the state has gotten bigger, more and more wealth has accumulated to the top 1% or the top 5% of people, right? let me just see if I can look this up. I just read this the other day, but I don't want to get these numbers wrong. It's increased over the past few presidents in the United States, and this is really important that so much more money accumulates. So let's see here. So the top 1% wealthiest U.S. households own 32.7% of the total U.S. household wealth. And the top 5% hold well over half of all the household wealth. The bottom 90% hold only 30% of total household wealth. And this is increasing. This is increasing over time. And this is a huge problem. The portion of U.S. households reaching the $1 million club grew from a mere 1% in 1965 to an estimated 9% as of year-end 2005. The U.S. population grew by over 100 million, from 194 million to 296 from 1965 to 2005. The number of family members living in a household with a net worth of more than $250,000 increased nearly tenfold, from about 11.6 million in 1965 to nearly 100 million today. And what's happening is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is stagnating at best. And when people say the middle class is stagnating, they're failing to understand that the middle class is losing money, because it's like saying, well, I'm stagnating, but I'm going heavily into debt. Well, no, that actually means I'm falling behind. So the huge problem is that when there's a government, the rich will use the power of the state to reverse their historical disadvantage in the free market, right? Their higher costs and lower drive, lower ambition, lower work ethic. They will use the state to continue to transfer wealth to them, even though they should be turning over in the spin cycle of the free market and going back down relatively quickly after they go up. Of course, everybody who gets to the top wants to stay at the top, but it's really hard to do that, right? I mean, it's not particularly relevant, but somebody in Kenya is very big on running, right? Very big on, they do very well in the running games. And, you know, somebody said, well, how do we stop Kenyan dominance in running? It's like, well, we need to get them some school buses, right? Because the kids there all have to run to get to school. You know, kids always wake up late. They're always late for school, and they run to get to school. You know, and after 10 years of running from 5 to 15, you're pretty good at running. But if you subsidize and get them some school buses, then they'll sit there and, you know, pick on the pimply kids instead and won't get any running done. So their poverty is their success. This is very often the case in the free market. I mean, because I came from a dirt poor family background, like eviction notices, like couldn't rustle up $7 for a swim club, like no money at all kind of situation. You know, the rare times where we'd actually have some pop in the house, and I'd have friends over, I'd have to put like 9 ice cubes in everybody's glass to make one small bottle of pop go to 3 people, and then we'd be roundly mocked by everyone for being cheap. Well, I'm not cheap. I had to eat food that was moldy sometimes just because I was so hungry. I mean, it was poor. And so when I got a chance to get involved in the business world and make some money, oh my God, I was like a rocket. There was no amount of work that I wouldn't do. I was so excited and grateful, thrilled, took nothing for granted, worked like a demon on fire. But, of course, the state is what people use to keep the poor down. Let's give them shitty schools. Let's give them welfare. Let's give them games, right? And let's raise the minimum wage. Let's make sure that we create as many inducements to single parenthood as possible, because that will keep the poor from competing with us. I'm not saying it's all a conscious plan. It's just the way that these things play out. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of keeping the free market in place, but the government, the corporations are so heavily embedded in the government that I don't think they're really going to have the option to switch to alternative currencies. They're going to side with the government to crush alternative currencies. because corporations have become an extension of the state. It's fascistic, fundamentally. And so the major economic activity has become so corrupted by state power that they will fight against the free market.